I've never been one to shy away from those kind of difficult decisions or conversations that you have to have with people. It's more just the basic interactions you're having with people, the way you show up in meetings, the way you foster conversation and collaboration.
Well, like, what's the way that you do that to be kind? How is it different?
I think there was just more tolerance for assholes at Groupon and in the culture there.
Like how so?
Like,
tell me a story. Andrew Mason started a little website called The Point. An investor friend of his gave him $1 million in seed money. The Point failed, but Andrew then used that seed money to pivot his idea into the fastest growing company in history. Groupon hit a $1 billion valuation in only 16 months. For someone with no entrepreneurial experience at all, this was crazy. Yahoo offered to buy the company for $3 billion. Google offered more than $5 billion. Early on, the media wanted to adore him. After the company went public, the media wanted to abhor him. Groupon's current valuation, a modest $400 million. After Groupon, Andrew started a company called Detour. Once again, the idea failed. But once again, he was able to find a great clue for a new company in the company he was already building. Now, Andrew is the CEO of Descript. Descript is like a word processor for audio. If you've ever tried to edit spoken word audio, such as on a podcast, you know how time-consuming and frustrating it can be. Descript makes editing spoken word audio really as easy as editing a Word doc. So with Descript, not only can you edit spoken word audio by copying, pasting, and deleting text, but you can also edit by typing words. Descript's overdub feature can actually create audio based upon your voice. All you have to do is feed it several hours of training data. If you listen to the episodes here on Love Your Work in December, you heard my Descript overdub voice double fill in for me on the intros. If you're going to love your work, you have to read the signals the market gives you. Sometimes your plan B is a $1 billion idea. In this conversation, you'll learn, after going from having no experience as an entrepreneur to founding the fastest growing company ever, how has Andrew approached building his new company differently from how he built Groupon? And Andrew says that at Groupon, there was more tolerance for assholes. Now, what has Andrew learned about building a company culture where the mission doesn't get in the way of kindness? And Andrew said that he had a useful naivete about the money that he first raised. So how does he still hold on to this naivete even as a seasoned entrepreneur? Here is Andrew Mason. I'm here with Andrew Mason. And Andrew, my first question is, does the word half mustache mean anything to you?
No.
Okay, because you might not remember this. The first time that you and I met, you had half a mustache.
Oh, God.
That ring a bell?
Along which axis?
Along the, I guess if the vertical axis is the y-axis, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was...
So it was like a left or a right?
Yeah.
Like one of those. Yeah.
It was maybe like a 60% half mustache.
No, I don't remember that at all. Was it puberty or was it something else? Do you know?
I'll give you a clue. The date was November 14th, 2009.
That was, let's see. I think Groupon had been around for about a year. I don't know, or maybe a couple months. Maybe Groupon had been around. I'm obviously like very bad with remembering things.
We were having you were nice enough to come have brunch with myself and some other people who wanted to learn some stuff from you, and you explained to us that it was Movember. And
oh, right, okay.
And you said that are you starting to remember?
I remember Movember. I don't remember that Movember is men are challenged to grow a mustache, I think, for charity. And
right, yeah.
Everybody has their own take on a mustache. And I guess mine was a half mustache.
Yeah, you said something like you didn't want people to think that your mustache was serious. And so you shaved it or half of it or 40% of it,
Yeah.
which
Still,
I'm not sure if the message got across to people, but it was there.
because it looked so good.
Yeah. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, this is a new style that I need to
Yeah.
get on, I guess. So where were things at, do you think, November 14th, 2009? I think that Groupon was starting to go gangbusters.
Yeah. That was, well, so I was coming to your brunch to talk to you guys. Was that like in the context of the Point, which was very small, but there wasn't
No,
much of a startup community. It was in the context of Groupon.
you were definitely the CEO of Groupon, which was a very successful company, and we were very excited to have you
Okay.
come have brunch with us.
Okay. So yeah, then I guess Groupon started it was about a year old, and we were maybe a couple hundred employees at that point, and we were probably in about 3 cities. And the first Groupon clones had started to spring up, and we were probably, questioning in what kind of universe can this exist, and wrought with angst over that, and just doing everything we could to keep everything from falling apart at the seams.
Right. And I guess the Groupon, your Groupon story or your experience with Groupon seems like such an interesting juxtaposition because it started out as the Point, right? And so
Hmm.
the Point was basically, hey, I want to cancel my cell phone contract and I need to get 100 people to agree to do it with me so that I can get out of it, kind of, right?
Right. It was a platform for all manners of collective action based around this kind of tipping point mechanism where if you can get a certain number of people to do something, whether it's give money or take action, then and only then will they do that thing once you have enough that it'll actually make a difference somehow.
And then there were people actually making coupons in a way, right? Saying,
Hmm.
hey, I want to buy this thing. I want to get a discount, but I need to get this many people in order to get that discount. So that was happening on the platform already.
Yeah, at a relatively small scale. That was, when we would put together our pitch deck with a bunch of different use cases for this kind of abstracted mechanism, platform that's based around this mechanism. That would be one of them. This group buying case, get a bunch of people together, and we had seen evidence of that in China, people kind of organizing those things organically. So we just thought of that as one way to do it. And when we decided to do Groupon was when we just really focused in on that and let's go out and procure these deals ourselves and not wait for customers to do it. And then take the Woot model, which was this deal a day, really cool deal a day platform that would do like consumer goods and apply that to this deal a day on a city by city basis.
And it was huge. It was the fastest growing company in history. Is it still? Or I
As
mean,
far as I know, there's
yeah.
nobody called me and to give me the disappointing news that we had been overtaken, but it's possible. I haven't seen anybody else kind of, proactively bragging about that.
Yeah, it was huge. And especially,
Yeah.
that time in Chicago, it was like everybody was talking about Groupon. There was this group buying model, which was so genius. And then, as you said, there started to become all these copycats, clones that came around. And I guess I wonder about that. What did that feel like to see your idea just be copied in that way?
It felt awful. It felt personal and offensive. I think I don't know how I would feel about it now, but
Well, because
I had
now I
come.
think you would think of a business in terms of defensibility, right? Like having a moat of some sort. I think is what people usually that's the usual metaphor, right? Is that it's defensible, the idea.
Yes. I think at the time I had, previous to that, wanted to be a musician and write songs and stuff like that, and had always been someone who liked to make stuff. And for me, building websites was just a continuation of that urge to make stuff. And in music, if someone just copies the thing that you made, it's there's a word for that. It's called plagiarism. In business, it's called just smart or disruption or whatever. But so that was the way I processed it at the time. I think now, as I've just been deadened and jaded by by life, I probably wouldn't think anything of it. It just wouldn't occur to me to have feelings about it. Not that, yeah.
So it's interesting. It wouldn't even occur to you to have feelings about it. Is that something that, as you think of new ideas for businesses, and we'll get to your business Descript, which, by the way, our listeners have heard my voice double fill in for me for much of December. So as you work on new businesses, do you think about defensibility differently?
There's a lot of technology there. I mean, the way we built Groupon was taking the core e-commerce engine that we had built as part of The Point, plugging it into a WordPress site, and then doing a new post every day, and then sending out an email like this via some FileMaker backend that I built. And it was something that we literally built in 30 days. And so the initial technology of Groupon was incredibly easy to replicate, which is why we ended up at its height with over 2,000 clones across the world.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of technology that goes into what we're building at Descript, and a lot of just incredible attention to detail on a number of different fronts. So
Descript.
very different
Okay.
thing. I pronounce it both ways.
So,
So,
okay. I was saying Descript, and now I feel like I should start saying Descript. I'll just switch.
No, I feel like I should start
that.
saying Descript. Well, we're going to be like strangers passing in the night here, because I like your way.
I don't want to make you feel bad. You don't want to make me feel bad. So
Yeah.
we'll just adopt one another's ways of saying it. Has anybody ever asked you to make a movie of your life and your story of the Groupon thing? I mean, I think it would actually make a pretty interesting movie, because as I understand it, it's this guy who studied public policy, who wasn't an entrepreneur, who suddenly found himself as CEO of the fastest growing company of all time, and is in this, just getting swept up in this entrepreneur hype where everybody wants to interview him and hear his secrets, and he's totally not like that. And it seems like an interesting juxtaposition amongst many other things. Anybody ever approached you to make a movie of that story?
The night is young. Ask me, David. I'm waiting for you to ask me.
We'll see. Yeah, okay. I can just write the screenplay here in Columbia, and I'm sure that I can find some contacts in Hollywood to make that.
Yeah. No, luckily, the world at large has a lot more sense than you do on this particular issue.
You don't think it would make a good movie?
I don't think so. I think it'd be a lot of sitting around playing video games. I guess Twitch is popular, so.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like you strike me as somebody who isn't particularly motivated by money. You started The Point. It was a very, very much like a social good enterprise. And then it ended up being a coupon site. The company was worth multiple billions of dollars. And I imagine that what happens when you find yourself CEO of such a company is that you're not trying to make as much money as possible, but then various people for whom that is their value start surrounding you. I would just imagine that suddenly you'd be surrounded by people who want to get in on some kind of an acquisition deal, or they want to take something off of the top of this and get their piece of the pie, and then they're in your space. They're trying to get close to you, trying to persuade you in certain ways. Is that how it works?
Sure. I mean, the story that comes to mind is when Groupon was kind of a peak rocket ship mode in the first couple of years. We noticed ourselves coming up in a Google ad, like a search ad that would be like, have you been unsatisfied with a Groupon deal that you got? Click here. And it was this application for joining a class action lawsuit of people who weren't happy with their Groupon experience. And we looked at this company that was doing it, or this law firm, and they basically had 40 or 50 of these different fish in the water for different ideas or speculations of how they could build classes of customers for around different grievances. And, we had this, what we thought at the time was an incredibly gracious and liberal refund policy where you could get 100% refund at any time, no questions asked. And they ended up finding a way to do a lawsuit that, because we didn't have an expiration date, I'm kind of fuzzy on some of the details. The end result of it was us needing to put an expiration date on the vouchers, on the Groupon vouchers. And it was just this very clearly mechanism for this law firm to just find a way to graft some money off of these companies as they're growing. Didn't really end in a better experience or result for customers in any way. In fact, it was worse. And there was something quite disheartening about that experience, but that's just part of it.
And that's kind of like the main one. I mean, I remember you telling a story about going to dinner when potentially being acquired by Yahoo, and saying, well, I had been a vegetarian all my life, and I decided, well, if I'm going to be a part of this deal, I'm just going to go ahead and order the steak. And there was like a principle that it felt like you had abandoned in being a part of that.
Yes. Yeah, you just get beaten down.
So, I mean, what was this journey like? Because it's such an interesting juxtaposition that there's the point, there's the social good thing, the investors. I think the story went that the point wasn't working out. You had gotten $1 million, and they were kind of saying, "Let's go ahead and you either make some kind of change or give the money back to the investors." And so you scramble to make a change, and that's how Groupon happens. Is that
that's
what
right.
happened? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And was that when it ended up becoming a coupon site, and when you realized that was happening, was that difficult for you to process in terms of any of your principles or ideals that you had?
Not really, because we did it in a way that was fun for us. So on all fronts. So, I mean, we weren't just derisively referring to it as a coupon site at the time. The original idea for what the point was, and the way in which we saw the world being different because of its existence, was grandiose and noble of spirit and perhaps socially more meaningful. But it's not where we ended up with Groupon was not the opposite of that. It was more just along a different dimension, a dimension that's closer to entertainment. So first of all, we did it in a way where we said, if we're going to do this, let's make it fun. Let's do really write-ups that we think are surprising and don't just feel like pure advertising. And let's go out and really try to get deals from cool, unusual businesses where we can use this discount as a catalyst to get people to go out in the world and have an experience that they wouldn't have otherwise had that makes their life richer somehow. So that's really how it was in the early days. It was like we felt good about the impact we were having, both for these businesses that loved the service and the customers that were using the Groupons that also loved it. And the combination of that with just the thrill of being part of something that's growing like crazy and all of your friends are using it was really satisfying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of making things that are advertising seem like more fun, uh, have you ever? You've probably hired a lot of people in your life. How many people do you think you have given jobs to?
Well, Groupon, I think, had 13, 14, 15,000 people at some point.
Wow.
And then we've got another 20 or so here.
And
So 13,020.
Is hiring difficult? Is it hard to find the best talent?
There was a time when it was really just a needle in a haystack. But have you ever heard of LinkedIn Jobs?
It's interesting that you bring up LinkedIn Jobs because they happen to be our sponsor. I was going to tell you about them, actually. That's what this was all about. Because the hard thing about finding talent is if somebody doesn't have a job, you don't want to hire them, right? Because
That's right.
they don't have a job. There's probably a good reason they don't have a job. And it's the ones who do have jobs that you want to hire, but you can't find them because why?
Because they have a job.
Because they have a job. And because they have a job, what?
They're not looking for a job.
They're not looking for a job, right?
Right.
So that's what I was going to point out.
Yeah. I mean, and by the way, if I told you that there was a job site that was built on top of the world's largest professional network, like, wouldn't you want to use that job site? Isn't that just a total no-brainer?
I would definitely want to use it because the professionals who are on that platform, i.e. LinkedIn, are professionals who are trying to level up their career all the time. And people are on LinkedIn, it's a fun social network. People are spending time on there, communicating. And you can reach them with LinkedIn Jobs, even though they're not looking for a job. You can find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. You can pay what you want and get the first $50 off. Just visit linkedin.com/loveyourwork. Again, that's linkedin.com/loveyourwork to get $50 off your first job post. Terms and conditions apply.
Can I pay $50 and get that off?
It says you can pay what you want. I think what that means is that you can get as many impressions as you want on the LinkedIn Jobs advertising network. So as people are on LinkedIn, networking, building their careers, then you can just have your job posting show up to the most qualified candidates. I mean, this thing is a machine. A person is hired every 8 seconds with LinkedIn. Did you know that?
That's impressive.
Every 8 seconds. So as we've talked about this, that means there's been like 10, 20 people hired with LinkedIn Jobs. So I think that there's an interesting parallel between what you've done with Groupon and what you've done with Descript that I'd like to explore. And that's this idea that you had the point and people were using the point for this other thing. It probably wasn't really obvious right off the bat that was going to be this giant thing. It probably wasn't this light bulb moment like, oh, people are making coupons on here, basically, or they're doing group buying. That's probably a multi-billion-dollar idea. But you were able to see it and you were able to change course and follow that. And it ended up being huge. And then Descript is also a byproduct of a previous product. So was it just that you had that neural pathway wired so well from your experience with Groupon of let's look out for these little clues and change course? How did it seems like you're an expert pivoter or something.
The first time it took
I want to keep
going,
talking about LinkedIn jobs. You can, by the way. Sorry.
it'll be hard to resist, but I'll try. With the first pivot from the point to Groupon, it took being put in relatively extreme circumstances to even consider it. I was so fixated on the original vision of the company that it wasn't until our backs were against the wall and we had to find a way out, a way to survive and keep going, that we scrambled and started considering other options. And even as and even at the beginning, Groupon was there was a team of 7 at the company, and only a few of us were working on Groupon, while other people were kind of still focused on trying to figure out how to keep the point going, because that's where the excitement was from the people who were part of the company at the time. It was different and honestly, it was only the overwhelming customer success that we had really straight out of the gate with Groupon. Like, it happened very quickly. It was obvious that something was there.
But you took the month or so to build the product and try it.
Yeah.
And that was just, you were saying that was just because your back was so against the wall because the idea wasn't working. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting that you and the team had the wherewithal to try that idea. Were there other ideas that you tried, or were there other ideas that you thought about trying that didn't try?
Yeah, there was like a Kickstarter kind of approach that we were thinking about too, where it was more like raising money for either causes or initiatives that people wanted to start. But this time, with going from Detour to Descript, we kind of saw when we started working on Descript that it had the potential to be a separate product and even a separate business one day. And we had a separate team of people working on it. And from very, very early on, we were treating it like something that was a kind of a plan B. And once we got a prototype out there and started sharing it with customers, it quickly transitioned to being the plan A. So we were kind of, that time it was, I would say it was it was less emotionally stressful. It was more like we were open to the possibility of that outcome and planning with that in mind.
Tell me more about emotionally stressful.
Well, when you know how it is, like when you have an idea for something, it just consumes you and you can't imagine how it's not going to work. It's so obvious that you can see exactly how the future plays out and everybody in the world is using this thing somehow. And then there's a slow, painful process of coming to terms with the fact that that's never going to happen. And you hold that a little bit looser after you've been through it once or twice, I guess. And you realize that part of starting a company is, especially in the early days, the magic of looking at what you have and what you've built and looking at what customers are telling you and connecting the dots and finding something that is actually useful out of that.
So when you were in this position with the point where your back was against the wall, was there a part of you that was thinking, well, this idea is just not going to work. Why even try these other ideas?
No, because I felt so obligated to my investors and my employees that I just couldn't imagine giving up.
This was your first time that you even knew that this was such a thing. Somebody could give you $1 million to start a company, and
right.
And you immediately felt that sense of obligation pretty early on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that just seemed like such an enormous amount of money. And at this point, actually, we had raised some more money from NEA. And, what I know now from knowing venture capitalists is that that's part of the game. And it's really like the expectation is that some of these things aren't going to work out. But for me, it was such a inconceivable show of trust that they would give me this opportunity that I felt a real sense of obligation. And honestly, I still feel that with my investors. When I was doing Detour at first, I was just funding it myself because why not? And I thought it would be nice for a while to live without having any investors or VCs. And in many ways, I missed it. And so I went to the best investors that I worked with at Groupon and was lucky enough to be able to get them to invest in Descript. And I like having that sense of obligation and not just have it being the end of the chain, but being in service to someone else.
So are you saying that maybe there was something a little bit naive about the amount of obligation you felt early on, because part of the venture capital game is that we're throwing spaghetti against the wall. Some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. And that wasn't something that you quite understood at the time?
Yes, but I think it's a useful naivete that I still try to, I still hold on to. Like it's not rationally correct, but I suppose, but I find it, for me anyway, to be productive to have that force.
So I really enjoy Descript. As I said, my listeners have heard my voice double who filled in for me for the month of December on a lot of the intros, which is pretty cool. I guess it's a word processor for audio, right? And I find it useful. The thing that I find useful about it is it helps me find those little tidbits in a conversation that I can pull out and use for social media clips, or I can use them for quotes and such like that. And before, that's like prohibitively expensive because transcribing is very difficult. So how did you arrive from Detour to Descript?
So half of Detour was building this mobile app for immersive augmented reality audio tours. And the other half was producing the content. And the idea was that eventually that would be a platform where anyone would be able to produce stuff. But early on, we were going to eat our own dog food, make stuff ourselves. So we hired a team of radio producers and podcasters and got to see their workflow firsthand for creating these long form audio stories, between 20 and 60 minutes or even more. And the tool set that they had and the learning curve and speed of these tools made it clear that there was no way we were going to be able to make this a broadly accessible platform. It's just too specialized. And this was at about the same time that transcription was getting cheap and accurate. So we had a very obvious idea to build a audio editor that looked and felt like you're using a word processor, thinking that words are a better abstraction of audio than a waveform on a timeline. And so we found somebody who was getting his PhD at UC Berkeley in this idea, and we built a prototype and started showing it to customers. And, as we kind of worked through all of the different challenges of grafting the interactions around audio editing from a timeline to a document, and they all seemed to hold quite nicely, and we could build something intuitive. We just got really confident that there was a product and a business there, especially watching the explosion of podcasts largely populated by people who don't have a traditional audio engineering background and would prefer to not have to learn how to use complicated audio editing tools. So that's how we ended up there.
So you build this tool to help you with your own audio editing, own audio storytelling. Is that accurate?
That's right. Yeah.
As you're building the tool, are you thinking this could be a business, or where was the point where you got some signal that this might be the thing?
We were, because it was so indulgent to be building this second product inside a company that still didn't have product market fit on the first product, that the only way to rationalize it was to imagine it as another business.
I mean, was it hard to justify making that investment or expense in this side project? Did it feel like a distraction?
It was okay. I don't think I could have done it if it was my first startup and I didn't know how to do anything. But we had a really strong team that was working on Descript that could get stuff going, and it never felt like it inhibited our ability to be successful at Detour. And it just gave us this. It's not a strategy I'd necessarily recommend, that you start building your contingency plan inside your startup before your first startup's even working. But in this case, it worked out really well for us.
At that point, was it still your money?
It was until yes, it was. And then we spun it out and raised money from Andreessen Horowitz. And at that point, we sold off Detour to Bose and we're completely focused on Descript.
And so, I don't know, would you think that would have worked differently if you had investors? Would you have had the freedom to go build this other product?
I think if, like the investors I have now, if I told them I was doing that, they would have. I have great investors, and I think their bias is to trust the entrepreneurs that they are working with. Maybe share some pattern recognition or experiences that they've had that could be relevant, that might serve as kind of cautionary tales. But honestly, I think I might have felt too embarrassed by to pursue something like that because it is so unconventional.
Right. I mean, this is part of maybe the value of having your own skin in the game instead of somebody else's skin in the game, is that you can take those kinds of risks.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you think about or were thinking about as you decided that you were going to self-fund, that you wanted to be able to make a decision that you didn't have to
Justify?
Yeah, you didn't have to feel like if you made a mistake that like, oh, geez, sorry, I wasted your
Yeah,
money.
it was. In particular with Detour, there was an element of quality in the content that we wanted to produce that I really didn't feel like having conversations about with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it. And what gave me confidence to raise money with Descript is we had product market fit when we raised money. Like I knew there was a there. I didn't feel like I was messing around with anybody's money. I felt really comfortable asking them to take that bet. And there wasn't any huge, crazy, unconventional, risky part of that.
What would you say were maybe the main, after the entire Groupon experience, growing a multi-billion-dollar company, going public, getting, I guess caught up in, or the media using you as a punching bag here and there, if that sounds accurate to you. What are some of the main ways that you approached building your next company differently because of those experiences?
Most of the things are just the small micro adjustments that come with experience. When, I didn't know anything about management or anything like that when I get started. And you learn from the people around you, many of which don't know much about management either. And it wasn't really until I started hiring a senior team of executives that they started teaching me a lot about how to be effective at those aspects of my job. I think there are things in how we build the culture now. I think just being really there we cared a lot about culture at Groupon too. But we cared about things like having a great customer experience and doing right by the customer. Internally, I think, I've come to really value kindness. I think I used to think that kindness was somehow in opposition to being direct or having an open conversation or culture that encourages active debate of ideas.
How
But
does that manifest itself, this value of kindness?
always just being nice to people.
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, what does
And
that mean?
well, I think it just wasn't as much a concern at at Groupon. Like there was me and other executives that we'd hired could just like brutalize someone in a meeting or something like that, and in with a real just indifference to treating to the humanity of the interactions that you're having. And that's the kind of thing that I've just come to believe is completely unnecessary and counterproductive to getting the best out of a team and caring about the people and just like enjoying your work experience.
I mean, do you not find yourself in places as you're managing a company and dealing with money and hiring and laying off people, et cetera? You have to have difficult conversations that are going to hurt people's feelings sometimes. And how do you parse the difference between this is a thing that I have to do, I'm being as nice as I can about it, that person's feelings are hurt, and that's just the way it is, or whatever alternative it might be?
Yeah, it's not that hard. I don't think. I mean, I've never been one to shy away from those kind of difficult decisions or conversations that you have to have with people. When you have to have them, you have to have them. It's more just the basic interactions you're having with people, the way you show up in meetings, the way you foster conversation and collaboration.
Well, like, what's the
Um,
way that you do that to be kind? How is it different?
um, I think there was just more tolerance for assholes in at Groupon and in the culture there.
Like, how so?
Like
Tell me a story.
I'm thinking of a story of that I was not there for this, but I heard a story about somebody who right an office where they were not giving the new salespeople chairs until they closed a certain first quota of deals. They had to stand. So
Which
something like
is
that.
which is like a good thing now, right? The standing desk craze. It's like,
I don't. Yeah, it was before its time.
wow. So okay, you can't you get a chair as your bonus for closing 5 deals or something.
Yeah.
You get a basic chair to sit in. Okay. Wow, that's interesting. How did that happen?
Um, it was just this kind of single focus on performance and that being the main thing that everybody was thinking about, and some other basic kind of values fell to the background.
Right. And so now you value kindness in building Descript.
Yeah, I think another way to look at it is I just care. I think when you're younger, or when I was younger, I cared more just purely about the mission and like almost singularly focused on the mission and success of the company. Now I care a lot more about what it's like to work with people and the interactions that I have moment to moment with the people that I'm working with and my colleagues are having, and making sure that those are as positive as they can be. Because I think you just get older and life is short, and and we spend so much time at work, and soon everything is climate change is going to destroy everything anyway. So what's it all for if to not have meaningful connections with people from moment to moment?
So it sounded like before, kind of the mission of the company made it difficult to do that. But then the company became publicly traded.
It wasn't
You're
even
just-
that they were, it's not that they were at odds or anything like that. It was
Yeah,
just that
are
there
those
was
at odds?
an indifference to that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you have investment again for this company. I assume that means that there's some possibility that it'll become a public company at some point. Is that not something that you feel is at odds with being able to make decisions based upon your values?
Not necessarily. It's all about how you pull it off. And there's plenty of existence proof of companies that have done this stuff well.
Who are the companies that you look to for that?
I was just saying that hoping that you would not ask that question. But I don't know. I'm sure there are.
LinkedIn jobs. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you making the time to talk to me, especially about Groupon again, which I'm sure that you talk about all the time. I really do enjoy
Can't get enough.
Descript. I love Descript. It's wonderful. It's one of these things that as soon as you use it, you're like, where has this been my whole life?
Thank you.
So it's
glad
wonderful.
you like it.
Thanks for making it. Thanks for taking the time. And thanks for helping me with the LinkedIn jobs ad.
It's a great service. It needs no help.
And where would you like for people to go?
I think it's linkedin.com/jobs.
Well, how about that? Sorry, to get more of you and Descript and Descript.
Oh, descript.com, DESCRIPT.com, descript.com.
All right. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Andrew Mason of Descript. If you produce a podcast, I highly recommend it. Thank you for mentioning my work on social media. On Twitter, thank you to Diana Barrantes, Jorge Castro, Podcast Alley, and Jeff Nardick. And on Instagram, thank you to Freaky Howl, Imperial Purple, Daisy Man, and Paige Artie. Now, the top update came from Jeff Nardick, and Jeff says, I can honestly say that At Cadavy's Love Your Work is in my top 5 podcasts everyone needs to listen to. David Cadavy is a great interviewer and has amazing guests. Thank you so much for that, Jeff. At the core of being able to love your work is one question. Where does the money come from? Does the work you do make humanity better? Do the products you use help you grow as a person? That's why supporting Love Your Work on Patreon is good for all of us. I can focus on making a great show so you can become a better human. It's an honest exchange, value for value. This show costs hundreds of dollars a month to produce and bring to your ears. I invest my time and creative energy in making it, so I can't keep this show going without your support. Please support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/Cadavy. Think of it like a coffee meeting. Is this show worth buying me a coffee a month? Head to patreon.com/Cadavy to join. You'll get perks such as early access to ad-free content, masterclasses, or office hours directly with me. That's patreon.com/Cadavy, or Overcast users, just tap on the $sign. Love Your Work is brought to you in part by our top Patreon supporters, such as Jeffrey Mason. The theme music for Love Your Work is At Sea by Dorena from the album About Everything and More, by arrangement with Deep Elm Records at deepelm.com. Love Your Work is a production of Cadavy, Inc.